on one's spouse. Adultery is currently a Class B misdemeanor and punishable by up to 90 days in jail and a $500 fine. Assemblyman Charles Levine has sponsored the bill to toss the 120-year-old piece of legislation out. So far, there has been no opposition to the bill. Back in 1964, a legislative commission tried to get the law removed when it was modernizing the penal code, but it never went through. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, now this can work against you or for you. You know, at first I'm like, damn, fellas, we got to watch out. But women cheat too. And I know there's a debate whether women cheat more than men, but it's like, I don't know. But being a God-fearing person, I do believe in marriage wholeheartedly. And I think that this is a push to not get married by the law. Now, I know a lot of men say, I ain't never get married. This, even more reason not to get married. But no, wait, if you can stay and remain loyal and you can trust that you can remain loyal, this may not hurt you. Right? Because it's going to help you in court, especially if it's a misdemeanor. They committed the crime. They cheated. But if you get married outside the law, you get married for God. I don't advocate cheating for anybody. It's not good, but the shit happens, right? And as a man, I can understand as a man why men do it, right? And I guess you can be understanding for a woman doing it too, but not I. But what do you think about this? This is very interesting. I'm not sure. I think this is a law in other states too. I'm not 1,000% sure. But I can tell you this. I think it encourages morality. I think it does. But I'm not getting married under the law. It's not happening.
It is no longer a crime to cheat on your spouse in New York. The state has repealed a statute from 1907 which said adultery was a misdemeanor. The punishment for conviction would have been up to 3 months in jail. Long Island Assemblyman Charles Levine sponsored the bill.
New Yorkers no longer face months in prison for cheating on their spouse. Governor Kathy Hochul signed a bill Friday to repeal a law that's been on the books in New York State for more than a century. The law passed back in 1907 made it a misdemeanor crime to commit adultery, punishable by up to 3 months in prison. Hochul called the law, quote, silly and outdated, saying, quote, these matters should clearly be handled by these individuals and not our criminal justice system. Want to discuss all of this here, so let's bring in Assembly Member Charles Levine. He was the author of the bill to overturn the law. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Josh.
Of course. Well, first off, for folks out there who didn't know this was a thing, can you explain what the bill actually was, the law rather, that was in effect prior to this?
So this law was enacted in 1907 when Charles Evans Hughes was the governor of the state of New York. And it is a law outlawing adultery. And the actual language of the bill, of the law rather, is a person is guilty of adultery when he engages in sexual intercourse with another person at a time when he has a living spouse or the other person has a living spouse. So enacted in 1907, it remained on the books until yesterday.
How often was this law actually used? I imagine not very often.
So, Josh, it's a little difficult to determine this with complete accuracy because not all of the court records going back to the early 20th century have been digitized and are easily accessible. But we are able to determine that in that 117-year span, there were 13 people arrested and charged with adultery. And of those, 5 were actually convicted. And the last person charged was charged in 2010, and that case was eventually dismissed.
Why was the law enacted in the first place and still remained on the books for so long? As you mentioned, someone else had kind of introduced this previously. I'm sure there were efforts to overturn it, but now is the time that Hochul has overturned it. So explain to me why it existed in the first place.
There were substantial efforts to repeal this law. And as a matter of fact, when the law was enacted in 1907, it's interesting to go back to many of the editorials in newspapers and letters to the editors, and people complained that this is simply enforcing morality at a time when that's just not needed. Of course, in the early 1900s, in New York and elsewhere in the country, it was a time of great social and cultural change. But be that as it may, it was enacted in 1907. It was the expression of the legislature's sense of morality. And 60 years later, when the Law Revision Commission met to reestablish and draft our criminal laws, our penal law in particular, the recommendation was not to continue this as a potential violation of New York law. However, at that time, I think there were members of the Senate and the Assembly in New York State who thought that was simply too controversial. And so that did not happen. Now, we know the world has changed dramatically, changes dramatically every day, it seems. But the world we live in is somewhat different in many respects from the early 1900s. However, the world we live in is a time of great social change as well. And while it's interesting to note that sometimes we go forward in terms of passing effective laws and in terms of developing a true culture of friendship and brotherhood, there are times we take steps backwards. That's always the American way of history. But I thank Governor Hochul for signing this into law yesterday. And we're moving in the right direction. We're not moving in the right direction everywhere, but at least in New York State, we are moving in the right direction in many ways.
And I think we were just talking about this, but it was 3 months in prison as a result of, I guess, being convicted of this crime initially under the initial law, right?
Exactly. 90 days in jail and a fine of up to $500. So the concept that underlies the passage of laws is this. Laws are there to protect our communities. They are also there to serve as a deterrent effect. Now, we have laws to protect our communities. That's why kidnapping, rape, murder, and an utter litany of crimes are illegal, not only in New York State, but federally and in the other states. So that's a good thing when we pass laws to protect our communities. It's also a good thing when we pass laws that can serve as a deterrent. So this particular law did not benefit our communities. And in terms of it being a deterrent, in the 117 years that this law was in effect in New York State, again, there were only 13 instances we know of people actually charged with it. On the other hand, in those 117 years, I would venture to say that there were millions and millions and millions of instances of adultery in New York State. So it obviously didn't serve much as a deterrent. And that's one of the reasons I think it was time to get rid of this. We have to be very guarded and very careful. We don't want laws. We do not want our criminal laws or laws in general to reflect hypocrisy. We have to move away from hypocrisy. We have to live in the world of reality. If not, we're not going to survive.
And what kind of feedback are you getting from people in the public about this? Because I'm sure a lot of people have had a lot to say.
It has been mostly positive. And interestingly enough, on the day that this passed in the Assembly, there weren't that many votes against it. But I was advised by some who had voted against it that they thought it was a good idea, but they just didn't want to worry about being criticized for it. In terms of communications from people in New York State and out of New York State, they have been overwhelmingly positive. However, I did get some emails accusing me of blasphemy and telling me that God is going to send lightning bolts to get me. And at one point, someone told me I would even be excommunicated. But Josh, I don't think a Jew has been excommunicated since the days of Spinoza. And were that to happen, and I got to hang out with Spinoza, at least I'd be in good company. I don't know if Spinoza would have felt the same way. But by and large, the reception has been very, very positive.
My last question for you here. Any other laws that are on the books in New York State that you think maybe might need to be addressed and just stand out to you overall as being maybe of the same caliber?
Josh, I am sure if we went through all the criminal laws in New York State or any other state, and all the laws that are not criminal laws in New York and elsewhere, we would find many, many other instances of laws that could be repealed and set aside. Many of them don't rise to the level of the hypocrisy that's reflected in the adultery law. So I'm not going to go through a litany of other laws that could be repealed. I want to kind of keep that to myself so I can introduce those things in the legislature without giving anybody any forewarning.
And I was going to say, I'm in the state of Florida, and one that I just pulled up, it says it's illegal for a woman to fall asleep under a hair dryer at a hair salon. I can't imagine that's real, but that's just kind of shows you some of the weird laws that are on the books, regardless of what state you're in. Thank you so much, Charles, for taking the time to be here with us. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, but thank you very much, Josh, for focusing on this. I think the public should be aware. And I think all of us have to do everything we can to protect our rights. And the repeal of this law will certainly protect the rights of our citizens, especially when we bear in mind that almost all the people charged with adultery, not only in New York, not only in the United States, but certainly throughout the world, almost all of them are women. And I think it's time for us to stand up and protect the rights of men and women and our fundamental constitutional rights to be able to live freely and without fear or favor.
All right, Charles, thank you again for taking the time to be here with us today and discuss all of this. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Josh.
Good morning, you guys. Today, I just came across something that I never knew existed here in the United States, but this law is in New York. As you guys saw in the videos, that New York had a law that you cannot cheat on your spouse in New York, or you be spending 90 days in jail. And this law came about in the early 1900s. And this just shocked me all the way around. I I just thought cheating or not cheating was a moral thing. I didn't know cheating can become a crime. Right? You know how I mean, I bet a lot of people in New York didn't even know this law existed. Right? They just probably assumed that, hey, this person's not committing a crime. They thought it was legal in New York. But man, you guys, tell me what you guys think. Do you guys think New York should keep the law and not repeal it? Or what do you think? Because to me, men and women both cheat, you know? And I think that it it shouldn't be criminal because it's not like they're killing them or anything or burglarizing them. It's just feelings getting hurt, right? Nobody's going to die from feelings getting hurt. I don't think it should be like a crime, you know? And I bet people in New York cheat front, back, side to side and never went to jail for it. You know, they were getting away with crimes, basically, you know? But I don't know if this law is in other states. I surely wouldn't know. This is just crazy that these ridiculous laws from 100 years ago are resurfacing, and people want to repeal these laws. Some laws from 100 years ago are good to have, but this one, not so much, I think, in my opinion. But if you're going to cheat, you might as well just break up with the person and move on with your life. I mean, You don't want a reputation of a person who cheats, because then nobody's going to want to be with you because you have that reputation, right? But hey, it's a moral thing. But you guys tell me what you guys think. Will this hurt marriage because this law has been appealed? Are they going to appeal this law, or will it help marriages? Let me know in the comment below. Have a good day, YouTube.